Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. I'm John Potter, your host, and we are very excited that we have got a new lineup for the Lib Dem Podcast. We've got some of the best Lib Dems across the whole of the North coming to take part in the new series of podcasts. We've got some brilliant guests already lined up, but as always, we are going to be your regular podcast to get news about campaigning, about what's going on in Britain, and just basically allow us to have our views and share them with you. So I'm going to introduce us to our team. You know myself, I am Councillor John Potter, from the leader of the Preston Lib Dems and a Lancashire County Councillor. From day one, we have had Richard Kemp, CBE, the leader of the Liverpool Lib Dems. He's held the longest ever office in the LGA. They haven't been able to get rid of him, so we haven't been able to get rid of him either. We have Lisa Smart, who is a Stockport councillor, deputy leader of her group. She is also an advisor to campaigners and councillors across the country and was our target seat candidate in Hazel Grove. We have Owen Lambert, who's a history and politics graduate who works for the ALDC and has also been a parliamentary candidate himself in Morecambe. And lastly, but not leastly, we have Laura Gordon, who was our parliamentary candidate in Sheffield Hallam, the target seat, who is also been working for all sorts of charities and institutions. So she brings a wealth of knowledge about campaigning and what we should do. So firstly, welcome to the team. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Nice to be here.
Hello, thank you.
So we can't start anywhere else but coronavirus, and a lot's gone on since we had our last kind of latest news and updates kind of podcast. We've had a new Labour leader, the lockdown has been in effect, and now people are starting to talk about what comes after. So, Richard, do you want to kick us off? So where do you think we are as a country? What's happening with the politics of coronavirus? What are your take at the moment?
Well, there's a lot of talk about two things at the moment, numbers and when we come out of the lockdown. I still don't believe the numbers for a number of reasons. Yesterday, we had added on for the first time deaths in residential care, but they're nowhere near enough. In the Liverpool City region alone, we've had more than 450 deaths in social care, and they're only claiming 3,100 across the entire country. So the numbers aren't right. And we're not sure yet that we know what a coronavirus death is. So up till now, it's coronavirus deaths have been bronchial, could they breathe, questions like that. But postmortems in China, the UK and USA are now indicating that people are dying from the coronavirus with none of those. Young people have been getting blood clots, which have caused severe strokes. There are problems with heart, liver and kidneys. And it is essential we know that, so that we can begin to look at the contact tracing within our communities, which will lead us to coming out of the lockdown. Now, the bad news is that we won't be coming out of the lockdown effectively until the end of the year. That doesn't mean to say that some people won't and some businesses won't. I think there will be a gradual increase in the number, but there'll be three types of lockdown. What the government legally says we can and can't do, what the government recommends and public health officials recommend, and the last one is what we're going to do ourselves. So I'll just give you a simple example. If there's a good restaurant and you go in and you see the last table, you'd normally think, oh, good, I've bagged the last table. Now, a lot of people are going to say, I'm not going to go into a restaurant as crowded as this. And on top of that, there are 1.5 million people who will have to stay really under lockdown, the key 1.5 million people for an appreciable time. And lastly, that all leads to serious problems with our council's finances. I've just come out with a very unusual event supporting the Mayor of Liverpool. We have spent £78 million extra trying to deal with the coronavirus in our area. And so far, we've had 37 million. Our money in the second tranche was less than our money in the first tranche. And we're in a situation where we might have our Director of Resources declaring a 114 notice. That means stop providing all services. But even if that happened, we wouldn't have the money to keep our statutory services going, no matter how we implement them. So really serious times. And the government has got to be more honest, more open, less time on Boris Johnson's baby, more time on the rest of us, and particularly the problems that councils are facing.
Lisa, what's it like being a deputy leader in Stockport? What kind of situation are you guys facing on the ground?
So the same as Richard's described, the money coming in isn't enough to match the money going out. So if you think about all council finances, it's a function of income and expenditure. The income's gone down for all councils, so it could be something as transactional as car park charges, but also fees and charges for hiring out the town hall for a wedding, or all those sorts of things. Income is very, very low. Expenditure has increased dramatically. There's also an impact on all your standard sorts of income, like council tax, business rates, some of your investments. So some of the Greater Manchester, or all 10 Greater Manchester authorities invest in Manchester Airport. Clearly, if passenger numbers have dropped as dramatically as they have in Manchester Airport, that has an impact on the income that the airport group can generate. So it's income down, expenditure up, and the amount of money coming from government, exactly the same as Richard said, is nowhere near enough. So in Stockport, our Section 151 officer, so that's the Chief Financial Officer, estimates about a 40 million gap from where we were to where we currently are. The money that's come in from government so far is about 16 million. So Stockport has an annual revenue budget of around 240 million, and that gap is massive, and it will have an impact unless the government steps up to fill that gap. It will have an impact on the services that Stockport Council can deliver.
And I suppose that kind of nicely leads us on to is how critical or publicly vocal should we be with this? If anyone wants to take that up, So, I mean, Laura, you know, your group on Sheffield, obviously Labour facing generally, but again, how are the Lib Dems and Labour, what are they kind of doing? How aggressive are they being with their criticism? Because it's a very difficult situation.
And it's a really difficult balance. I think it's something that groups all over the country are struggling with. And if you look at Sheffield, I think the problem is that, you know, you have to see that you can see that councils are performing differently. And one of the, you know, we've seen a report on Look North a couple of days ago where Sheffield's got less than a third of the businesses that are eligible for the small business relief grants and release loans have been able to access them. Whereas, you know, in Leeds, it's nearly 2/3. So, you know, we can see things like, the Doncaster kind of got a letter out to all of the like everyone across the borough with their kind of council helpline within a week after the lockdown starting, and I got my postcard through 2 days ago. So I think we have to balance the fact that it's an incredibly difficult situation and be sympathetic to the councillors and the officers that really are doing their best with limited resources in this really difficult circumstances. But at the same time, we have to point out that, you know, some councils are not performing as well as others that are in the same position and are not doing the best they can with the resources available to them, and are letting vulnerable people down as a result. And I think what we've tried to do is to be constructive in that criticism and kind of not just say this isn't good enough, do better, but actually this is what, you know, here are some ideas for things that you could be doing. And trying to walk that line is really difficult. And I think it's the same at kind of national and council level, really, is that kind of balance, because the public doesn't want to see us knocking strips out of each other, but at the same time they don't want to see things going wrong and no one pointing it out or coming in with ideas for how to do it better.
And this is the kind of the problem we're going to face, isn't it? Because you do have sympathy for what councils and the government are going through, but you've got to be that critical friend, because there may be mistakes to be made in the future that can be avoided if we say something now.
I don't know if it's about being a critical friend. I think it's about being constructive, I think, with our criticism. I don't think Richard and Joe Anderson are suddenly going to form a firm friendship. I don't think that's on the cards. What I do think, though, is that they both want the best for the people of Liverpool and the region. And actually somebody pointing out, well, have you thought about this way of doing things? Exactly as Laura pointed out, some councils took different decisions that have had a better impact or a less bad impact on the vulnerable. And so I think it's being constructive. I don't think friendship should be one of our aims necessarily.
And I think this is
that ain't going to happen, I can assure you.
Yeah, I think this is just such a Lib Dem point, though, because one of the kind of core things about being a Lib Dem is that we believe in diversity of thought and diversity of perspectives, and this core principle that actually, if you bring together different perspective and different way of thinking, different ways of thinking, you will come up with better ideas and better solutions. And that underlies so much of our commitment to, including things like proportional representation that are fundamental to who we are. So I don't know, I may have just broken a land speed record for how quickly one can shoehorn proportional representation into a discussion about local
local Brexit? You haven't mentioned
coronavirus. But actually, I do think it's kind of core to who the Lib Dems are. It is this idea that actually, if you bring together people that have different perspectives, you will get better ideas and better solutions. And I think that's what we should be trying to provide, is these constructive solutions to this unprecedented crisis that we're in, and that we're all trying to do our best to respond to.
And again, and that kind of again leads us perfectly on to, Keir Starmer being elected as Labour leader, how we work with Labour going forward. I'm in a position where I think all of us are kind of Labour facing, really. I think in all our councils, actually. Although parliamentary wise, Lisa has a Conservative up against, and I have a Conservative in county. But it's interesting to see where Labour go, because I think certainly after the December election, there was a feeling we've had such a walloping that we're going to have to work, because basically we know we're probably not going to win in 4 years' time. Do we think with Keir's election and the coronavirus, does it give Labour an opportunity? Do they think actually we might be able to win in 4 years' time?
Well, it's always good to have a moderate Labour leader for the Liberal Democrats, because we do best under it. But I don't know what it's like in other areas. In Liverpool, it's delightful, because while momentum were at their peak, they ensured that 4 of the 5 MPs for Liverpool were extreme left-wing Corbynite supporters. And they're spending as much time fighting each other now in Liverpool as they've ever been. And the sad fact for us is we would have seen that coming to fruition on Thursday next week, when we would, without a doubt, have taken seats off the Labour Party. So in some ways, in Liverpool, it's business as normal. They don't like each other even more than they don't like me and the Liberal Democrats.
So in Stockport, the seats at a council level, it's currently a Labour administration, but all the seats where we're fighting, pretty much, we're Tory facing. And the 2 parliamentary seats that ever change hands are Cheadle and Hazel Grove, and at the moment they're Tories, but we're still working on doing something about that. I think that Richard's absolutely right. If you look at the record of when we do well, it's when Labour are not completely at the edge of a particular spectrum. And I think for me, I'm not interested in seeing more Labour elected officials. I think that more Liberal Democrats being elected would be a good thing. That said, agreeing with people and working with people when we agree with them on something, I think comes naturally to Liberal Democrats. And we're seeing that around coronavirus. We're seeing that around when we can work cross-party locally on issues. So maybe the environment is something where there can be some shared purpose. And I think working with people from whatever party and from none on issues where we agree is a very different thing to formal agreements and pacts and going down that particular rabbit hole.
Mm.
So Owen, from your point of view from the ALDC, what kind of campaigning stuff should the Lib Dems be doing now? What kind of things can we start training more? We've got new software coming up. I mean, people like myself, and I'm not right now, I'm usually in like the 7th circle of hell with campaigning ready for local elections at this very point. So what can campaigners be getting on with at the moment?
Well, there's a multitude of things, really. I think the most important thing is that we sort of prepare ourselves for 2021, especially in Morecambe. I've come from an area where traditionally the Liberal Democrats haven't been as big as they have been in, say, Liverpool, in, say, Sheffield, in Stockport, Preston. So for smaller parties especially, but I suppose even for the bigger parties, they can sort of get used to, now that we've got this free time, to doing a bit more training. I think, HQ have their online webinars for specific topics. Of course, ALDC have been providing webinars for years now, and even now we're still providing them. And the most important thing for me as a digital campaigner has been to get to grips with Affinity Publisher. Now that, of course, the party has moved on from Page Plus, which I'm sure a few of us have been using for the past couple of years. And I'd like to take a bit of time to talk about that, because I think a lot of people that I've been speaking to especially have been saying, well, why do we need to sort of learn another piece of software? Why do we need to learn this all again? The important thing is, of course, is that as software gets older, it's not as secure. And of course now new people, new campaigners coming into the party, young people especially, won't be able to buy licenses for things like Page Plus. So you'll have to buy the new software. So it's very important that you do sort of update, and people, groups like HQ and ALDC will be providing our new templates for leaflets, for sort of knock and drop content. That this will all now be in Affinity Publisher format. Of course, for the time being at ALDC, we will still be providing things in Page Plus. It's not going to be a complete phase out immediately. But I suppose this is the time really that we can start sort of getting to grips with the new software and, maybe learning some new things.
Richard's gone. You've talked about software and computers, and Richard's just had enough. That's it.
This is my, unfortunately, that's my passion. I'm far too nerdy about it.
I did enjoy during the general election, one of the more amusing communications we got during the general election was the news that Serif, the organisation that makes Page Plus, had discontinued it, but had made it available for 1 week only for the Liberal Democrats for people to buy new licenses because of the December general election. So, I think that does sort of say something about how keen they were to kind of get this off their perks.
One of the nice things that, if you might notice, I disappeared before because I've got a book exchange just outside my house, which started off with 2 small boxes, now has 8 crates. 2 crates came this morning with children's books and adult books in, and it's raining, and Erica's getting them all in because I'm talking to you. But just
so did you just go out there to shout to your wife to tell her to go get in 8 crates of boxes?
That's right, yeah.
You're a real hero there, Richard.
But the point, more important point than making sure Erica is exercised, is that we can still do community work in different ways. So when the sun was good, I've been walking around safely talking to people. We've added 250 email addresses on since the start of the lockdown. We do a weekly e-newsletter, which gets widely circulated by other people. And we're adding reasonable amounts of stuff on to Connect in addition to the form. So we can take our traditional campaigning and community beliefs and find ways to do them which reflect the needs of our communities. And we should be doing that.
I think Richard's right. There's that, it comes as instinctive, I think, to some of our councillors and campaigners to take that community leadership role. And I think others, maybe who are newer to it or who don't have great role models very close to them because they're not in an area of Lib Dem strength, maybe need just taking gently by the hand and showing what good looks like. But that community leadership role sometimes is about giving information, sharing information. But it's also, hi Erica.
My hero who's just done all the heavy lifting for me.
Yes, yes, I'm not going to comment on the Kemp marriage. But that community leadership role, it can take a digital form. It could also be on the phone. So many of our councillors and campaigners are using this opportunity. For some people, they've never been as busy. They're trying to do a full-time job. They've got kids at home. They've got caring responsibilities. It's chaos. Other people might be furloughed or their normal work isn't in quite the same shape as it often is. And they've got a bit more time. They can spend phoning members of their community, getting email addresses from people, checking that they're getting the support that they need. And the party has set up some specific target pools on Connect so that you know who to talk to, who said, yes, I'm happy for you to use my phone number. It's a great way to get trained on communicating with residents in a way that isn't that hardcore campaigning, hardcore canvassing, tell us who you're voting for. It's tell us how we can help you. And it's that community activism, which is on the phone rather than on the doorstep. And I think lots of people have been doing it, and it'd be great if even more were. And
I think it's a great point, because I think some people, are quite nervous about canvassing on phones. They think, it's really intrusive. But actually, you're right, Lisa, because I've done some phone canvassing as well with some vulnerable residents in my patch, and actually not having the hard political sell is a lovely, easy way of getting you into it, because, the most awkward questions is, who you're going to vote for in the next election. That's the most awkward question to ask on the doorstep. But actually, you're not asking it this time. You are generally just asking them, how are they doing? Here's some advice if you need some. It's a lovely way of getting you into canvassing if you're new at it or have never done it on the phone.
And I think people are telling us how they vote, although we don't ask.
Some people aren't speaking to another human being that day, and so it's a lovely thing to be doing if you've got the time to do it. Yes. It really is.
And I think that's such an important point, because actually some of the people that that I've been talking to about doing this have had actually the opposite objection, which is the people that are quite experienced phone canvassers have been sort of saying, don't you think it's a little bit inappropriate to phone canvass people in the middle of the pandemic? And I think emphasising that that's not what we're doing at all. It's not political. It's, phoning people up and seeing how they are. And that's, it's why we try and get elected. It's not the process of trying to get elected. It's what the point is, which is to be able to help people. And this is a really concrete way that we can help people. By phoning them up, seeing how they are, pointing them to the relevant services or volunteer groups if they're not in contact with them. And I've done a little bit of this, and everyone I've spoken to has been really appreciative of the phone call. And it is really nice to feel that you could do something, because I think one of the things that everybody struggles with in this kind of situation is this feeling of helplessness, that we're in this horrible situation and there's so little you can do about it. But actually, this is a thing that you can do that's relatively easy, and it's just a case of picking up the phone and checking on the vulnerable people in your community that they're doing okay.
And I especially think as well, within our own local parties as well, especially in Morecambe, in the Morecambe party, we're a much smaller party. We just simply don't have the data that some of the larger local groups have on their local community. We don't have the email addresses. We don't have the phone numbers. So instead, what we've been doing is we've been going through Lighthouse and checking up on our membership instead, just sort of ringing up again, referring them to local hotlines if they need anything, asking if they, even if they need anything dropping off, if I'm going out shopping, just to call, just obviously not call round, but just sort of drop something off outside if they need anything in particular. So it's also crucial that, while we are communicating with the wider public and making sure that our residents and our constituents are okay, but also focusing and making sure that our membership and our supporters are okay as well.
And since the 2019 general election, there has been a sense that the Lib Dems are feeling a little flat. And we did get a surge of members after the EU referendum, and then obviously you always get a little bit of an uptake before a general election. Just making sure those members are all right. They feel maybe they want to vent or get someone off their chest. It's just good practice. While you've got time now, just talk to them. See if there's any issues. See if they want. And actually, I've gone through virtually all our members now in Preston and Wyre, and so many of them have offered to help in any way as well. And it's really life affirming actually how many of our Lib Dem members do want to do more and do want to help if they can. But I want to talk a little bit about how awkward next year's elections are going to be. Now, it's probably slightly different for me and Owen because we are a two-tier area where I think the other three of you are all just single-tier metropolitan boroughs. So, one of the things
such a thing these days, John, because of the complexities of layering of local government.
Yeah. Well, I just want to highlight something that's happened. So, because obviously the elections this year have been postponed, so we'll have joint county and borough elections next year. And to make things a little bit awkward and why we need to plan, my city council ward has 3 different county divisions that come into it in some part. And then we have the neighbouring county division that has 3 different city wards in it. So balancing that and making sure, you've got your candidates in place, figuring out how are you going to campaign in those areas, who's going to be in your leaflets, what you're going to talk about. That it's going to make it a lot more complicated, and local parties have kind of got to get their head around that. And that's before you start thinking about police and crime elections. If you live in Scotland and Wales, which have their elections, I think the London mayoralty's on, as well as everything else. So get down and planning. And I don't know what you guys are doing in the Met, but I assume you're going through the same sort of process we are.
Yes, we're lucky in Stockport not to have the level of complexity that you have. We're in part of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, so we've got a mayor. We don't have who has the responsibilities of a police and crime commissioner, but we have the mayoral election next year as well. We in Stockport were, like Richard in Liverpool, we were hoping to move forwards this year. We were planning to do some winning, and that would have possibly led to the Lib Dems being the largest party on Stockport Council, and we were hoping to run the administration. Clearly, we need to be more patient, and we've got elections next year. They're going to be the biggest set of elections that the country has seen since 1970. I can't remember whether it's 3 or 4, but I'm absolutely sure Richard.
73, I was there.
And that means that it's going to be everybody, I think, has got elections next year wherever you are in the country. And so some of those reciprocal arrangements that exist between neighbouring areas where, so for us, we just over the border in Derbyshire, they're going to have all their elections, and often we help them, and when we don't have elections, they help us when they don't, but everybody's got elections next year. And I'm not sure everybody's got their head around that yet as to how, just the size and the scale of this set of elections next May.
I mean, I think we also need to start thinking that the way that we campaign normally may not be possible. We're likely to be living in some form of, like, not necessarily a lockdown, but some form of restricted mobility for the next, for the next year, probably until the next elections, if there's not a vaccine by then. So, will we be able to go canvassing, or do we need to think about phone canvassing? Will we be able to do leaflets on the scale that we normally do leaflets? Or do we need to be really leaning into the social media and really starting to think through, actually, if this is going to be the sort of new normal, or some form of kind of semi-lockdown that's kind of less lockdown than we are now, but is not back to sort of what we used to, is going to be the new normal. How do you run a local elections campaign in that environment?
Yeah. The easy thing for us is that we've clearly got all our candidates in place for next year. So we'll be fighting in Liverpool 30 wards, a city mayor, a police commissioner on the Merseyside boundaries, and the regional mayor on the Liverpool City regional boundaries. So that is a little bit complex. And the beauty for me is we were going to come and help John Potter. So I was going to have electrocution lessons, so I'd learn how to talk proper when I went there. But I think what we're in a position to do now, which we're already doing, so our target ward candidates are doing the same sorts of things at a lesser level as our candidates are. The day we can hit the ground running is usually about September or October. We don't know when it is this year, but we're ready. And because we haven't spent this year's money, we hope we'll have enough money to cope next year as well.
Can I tell you what?
Just to make a point on money, as Richard's raised it, because we've got all these elections next year, that means that the expenses limits are going to be, in many cases, higher than we're used to. And so that means that everybody can spend more. That means that we're all going to have to think about where that money comes from. Richard talked about having candidates in place with a year's grace almost, or a year in advance. For some people, they might not want to be a candidate next year, but events happen, life changes, and it's worth checking in with people to see, well, are you still up for it for next year? Or was it this May or never?
No, we told them they're standing again. We don't do things by democracy. It's very good in theory.
So the worry I had, I mean, when I thought, I was a little bit relieved when the local elections were cancelled this year, if I'm honest, because I felt, 2019, all my people were knackered. 3 national elections, it was really, really tiring. Okay, we weren't in a position that Stockport and Liverpool, and where we weren't looking at thinking of either gaining a council or something like that. But I did think, actually, if the Tories were going to get a bounce, it was going to be in the 2020 local elections, which have now passed. But is there a risk now? So the way I kind of have always done my campaign is work harder and earlier than the others. You know, so by the time they get along to starting campaigning in March or April, we've already been on the ground for months doing all the graft. If that's changed and we can't do that graft, and coupled to what Lisa just said, they suddenly have the ability to spend a lot more during the election period, is that a real risk for the Lib Dems next year?
Which party do you think's got money? Parties are broke at the moment. The Labour Party might have to go into administration because of their legal costs. So this isn't going to be easy for any of us, but the advice still must be, and we're not going to spend, we could have spent about £70,000 this year in Liverpool, but because we're having an integrated campaign, we're going to spend what we normally spend. So it won't make that much difference to us. And I don't think it'll make all that much difference to the other parties where we're Labour facing. Of course, if you're facing Tories, then they might be able to bring more money in. But that's why the message, which I'm sure Owen is going to give us in any second now, is get going as quickly as you can and as frequently as you can. Is that right, Owen?
I mean, that's what I was brought up with in the Lib Dems. That was the message. Yeah, no, it's very important, I think, to it's, you know, we can throw money at anything really, but I think the one thing that I was taught when I was campaigning in Bury, in particular, was that you need to ensure that you are targeting correctly. You need to ensure that you're talking to the right people, that you have the correct audience. Otherwise, you're just wasting time, you're wasting resources, and you know.
But you're right. I mean, in regards to targeting, it might be some awkward decisions have to be made locally. Actually, you thought, well, you know, we were going to go all out for this ward, but now that we've got something else to have to fight as well, or we're defending a county as well, suddenly we have to make kind of those ugly decisions where you think actually resources have to go more in this place than what we would have. But that, again, these are the choices you've got, because none of us have infinite money, resources, or people. And so that's what you've got to weigh up.
But again, let's not forget what we were talking about before about the work we do during the coronavirus lockdown. When I go out and I'm able to talk to people, what's the impression? Oh, it's great to see a councillor coming round. When I see people taking the books outside, oh, you work so hard for the community. Our e-newsletter is eagerly read. Interestingly, we know what they click on, and it's to find out which chippies and restaurants are still doing takeaways. But people remember this. So soft politics actually leads to hard conclusions. So you don't have to go out and say, I'm a Liberal, because people know that. And I think they will remember it, but they don't see anyone from the Labour Party at all, including their local MPs, doing anything at this time.
No, I agree. I mean, we have our wonderful candidate, who was the candidate for Lancaster and Fleetwood during the general election, has started up an initiative where in his local area, this is my good friend Peter Jackson, has been, during his daily exercise, government mandated, I can assure you he's only been going out once, has just been picking up litter and just going around picking up litter and putting it in a bin, taking pictures and encouraging other people in his patch to do the same. And sure enough, all of our local Lib Dem members have been, as they can, have been trying to do this. And it's you know, it's something small, and it may be something a little inconsequential, but you're out there and you're doing something visible. And it's very important that we continue to do that while things are a little difficult.
And I think on that, that's probably a good place to end our first podcast of the new round. So thank you all very much for joining us via Zoom. Obviously, paychecks will be are slower than normal because of coronavirus. The money is coming, I promise. But thank you, everyone, for listening to this podcast. I hope you liked it. You can always go and check out all our previous podcasts. We did a great set of stuff about virtual conference ones, talking to some of the groups and societies within the Lib Dems. But do subscribe to us both on YouTube, where if you're watching this video, or via your podcast provider, so you'll never miss an episode. If you want to get in contact with all of us, we're all online. I won't read out all the handles now because it will go on forever, but do find all of us online, or you can find everything to do with the Lib Dem Pod at Lib Dem Pod on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. So on behalf of myself and the rest of the team here, thank you very much for listening and downloading, and we'll have another episode very soon.
See you.